What is going on with Bitcoin's price? It has been an incredibly volatile week. We've gone from the mid $90,000 range all the way down to $70,000, $78,000. We skyrocketed back up, having a $10,000 green candle yesterday, and now we're back down again in the mid 80s. What is going on? Is this a volatile sign that the bull market is over and actually everybody's wrong? We're beginning to break down as Bitcoin's getting top heavy. Or is this a normal cycle correction and we're actually probably going a lot higher? This is the question everybody has today and yesterday over the last 2 days. A lot of people are really wondering what's going to happen with Bitcoin price. Is the 4 year cycle dead? So in today's video, I'm going to talk about that. Now, before I get into the numbers, I just want to say anecdotally, there seems to be a lot of pain out there. I've gotten called way more nasty names and I've been cussed out way more in the last 3 or 4 days than probably the 3 months before that combined. So there are a lot of retail people out there right now that are very mad at me and very angry. So I think anecdotally, my spidey sense, my gut says that there's a lot of pain right now. Yeah, that doesn't mean the pain necessarily inherently has to stop, but it definitely it's very funny how $80,000, $85,000 invokes genuine anger and hatred out of some people. And just barely 3 months ago, it was euphoria. So anecdotally, it's funny how that works, but you don't want my anecdotes. You want the numbers. So without a further ado, let's get into numbers. What do I actually think is going on this Bitcoin cycle? So I think better than looking at a 5 day, 1 month, or even a 1 year chart for Bitcoin price. It is much healthier to look at the long term, right? Because this looks really volatile, right? That big move yesterday looks a lot more volatile compared to the past, right? Pretty much we've had one solid up move over the last year. Now, I think this is really bullish. I think this is really good. We've had so much volume transacted in this high layer, right? Back in 2021 and 2022, we spent barely 6 weeks in the $60,000 range. Now we have spent about a year over the $60,000 range. So, if nothing else, even though some people might say, oh, my compound annual growth rate between 2021 and now is not that good, I think it's worthy considering some context. That yes, sure, if you bought the absolute pico top of $69,000 in late 2021, and you're comparing that exact pico price point to the price point now, well, yeah, of course, your annual returns over the last 4 years haven't been that great. However, instead of flirting with a very overweight heavy position for a couple weeks, now we are well positioned above a large base that we've been building over the course of the last year. But again, I digress. I like to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This is my genuine opinion of what's going to happen in the coming years. A lot of people ask me all the time. One of the things I want to know more than anything is, Luke, what do you think the price is going to do? What do you think? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? How high do you actually think we're going to go this year? Or whatever, right? That's what people want to know. And so I'm telling you, this is exactly what I think is going to happen. I think it's kind of stock to FOMO model idea that Wicked Smart Bitcoin has put together and updated over the years. I think it is conceptually the best concept. Do I think the orange line is going to follow the black line precisely? No, no, I don't. Actually, I think the hyper Bitcoinization moment is going to take way longer than the late 2020s, even the late 2030s or 40s. I think it's going to take a very long time. However, conceptually, I really like this idea because it accounts for the fact that returns are diminishing. However, it also accounts for the fact that fiat returns will not diminish because fiat returns are an exponential. Okay, so why do I think this makes sense? Well, obviously, going from 1 cent to 10 cents is a 10x, right? Going from $10,000 to $100,000 is a 10x. But obviously, these two 10x's are not created equally. Going from $10,000 to $100,000 per Bitcoin is a move of hundreds of billions of dollars. Going from a move of $100,000 to $1 million is literally a multi-trillion-dollar move. Some of these other 10x's are multi-decatrillion, if not multi-centitrillion-dollar moves. So obviously, there are going to be diminishing returns as we approach a larger and larger percentage of global capital is going to get progressively harder to move said percentage of capital. Obviously, it's just intuitive. It's easier to have a return from $1 to $10 than from $10 to $100 billion. However, while I do believe personally it is likely that Bitcoin follows a power law because the data back tested for 15 years is very convincing, the reality is that the dollar, the number and supply of dollars in existence, does not grow at a power law. It grows way faster than a power law because it's an exponential. The rate of dollar creation is an exponential. It's not a power law. So I think potentially in real terms, it can make a lot of sense to view Bitcoin from a power law perspective. There are many wonderful people online that show Bitcoin power law charts. This is one of the most visually appealing ones I have found to explain the power law time contours. This is a relatively recent post from about 2 days ago, so this one is much more updated. And what it shows here is that basically Bitcoin is ahead of power law support to some degree at any given time. Sometimes it's 1 year ahead, other times it's 4 years ahead, right? Right now, Bitcoin is about 2 years ahead of power law support. What that means is that if the Bitcoin price were to be flat for the next 2 years, approximately 2 years from now, this current price would become dramatic support, right? So right now, maybe it's too high, maybe it's overvalued, but this price, a mere 700 days from now, is going to be stupid dirt cheap, right? Now, of course, Bitcoin could continue up this channel and it could become 3 years, 4 years ahead of parallel support. That's totally true, right? In fact, it could break down. We saw this in late 2022 with the FTX crash, right? Bitcoin fell below this channel. It fell below the power support line for about a month and a half, 2 months or so, right? You can see that very, very tiny dip on the right third of the screen here. But the point is that Bitcoin typically is somewhere between this 1 to 3 year range ahead of power law support. So what that means is that let's look at the end of 2025. What does that mean potentially for the end of 2025? Well, if we were to copy the 2021 cycle and the 2017 cycle, we could be 3 to 4 years ahead of power law support. In late 2025, that would mean that we would be about, what would that be? That would be about $300,000, $250,000 to $300,000 per Bitcoin in the last quarter of 2025 if Bitcoin were to be 3 to 4 years ahead of power law support. So that's one way to look at it. You could look at Bitcoin and say, oh, well, it's growing at a power law, blah, blah, blah. But again, what I think that misses, and I think some power law people would agree with me, other people wouldn't agree with me, what that misses is that your y-axis, which is dollars, that is depreciating at an exponential rate, not a rate of a power law, right? Interest is exponential. The rate of the dollar's decline is exponential. We've gone from tens of millions to hundreds of millions to billions to tens of billions to hundreds of billions to trillions to tens of trillions. Now we're the hundreds of trillions of dollars of unfunded liabilities to the United States. We started at 49 million. Now we're at 220 trillion. Pretty soon we're going to be talking in terms of quadrillions that eventually tens, and for my kids, hundreds of quadrillions of dollars. My point is the y-axis here is an exponential. And so at some point, the exponential decline of the dollar is going to outpace the rate at which Bitcoin is eating everything else. Right now, Bitcoin is eating everything else way faster than the rate that we're printing dollars. But at some point, I believe maybe decades from now, okay, I don't expect this year, I don't expect it next year, but probably at least a decade, maybe multiple decades from now, what's probably going to happen is that it will break to the upside as people desire and demand, I want Bitcoin, not only as my store of value, but also my unit of exchange, also as my unit of account, right? That's a point a very long time from now. It's not coming anytime soon, right? Again, this black line on the chart here is more of an example than, a prescription or prediction, but it's a conceptual idea. So the way to think about it here is that we only have three options, right? Because why are most of you clicking on this video? Why are most people scrolling Twitter all day or scrolling Reddit or watching YouTube videos trying to guess, is this it? Is the cycle dead? Is it going blah, blah, blah? What we crave, what our human brains crave, we crave absolutes. We crave certainty. We want to know what the future is going to have. And that's why a lot of people are cursing me out right now and very mad at me and saying all kinds of nasty things about me in texts and emails and in person too, believe it or not, at times. A lot of people are very mad because people want certainty and people blindly attribute other people as having that certainty. Like people want to assume, oh, Michael Saylor is smarter than me, so therefore he knows the future, and I should just assume what he says is inherently what's going to happen. But that's not true, right? Maybe Michael Saylor knows more than you. Maybe I know more than you. Maybe he knows less than you. Maybe I know less than you, right? But the point is, you shouldn't have certainty in your mind, no matter how good the information you have is. People want to pursue more information to delude themselves into a worldview that they are certain is going to happen. We are going to hit $200,000 this year. We are going to hit $1 million this year. We are going to hit X price by Y date. And I'm here to tell you that's not the way you should think. In fact, you're going to lose money if you think that way. I know a lot of people right now that are taking on obscene amounts of risk because they think this is for sure the bottom. We're not going lower. There's no way the stock market goes any lower. I'm here to tell you the stock market could go lower and it could drag Bitcoin down with it. There are plenty of other people I know right now that have 50 to 80% cash positions on the sidelines because they're so sure it's going down. And I'll tell you my allocations in just a moment. But my point is that both of those sides, one of them's going to be wrong, the other one could be wrong, or they both could be wrong, and Bitcoin does something entirely different. So my encouragement is have a long-term time horizon and think in probabilities, not in absolutes, because we don't know what's going to happen, including myself. So this is what I would encourage you to think about. There are only three options here, only three options. Option number one is that Bitcoin underperforms the typical 4-year cycle, right? And that this chart I showed before, it breaks, Bitcoin doesn't hit the 3 to 4 years ahead of power law support. We stay at the 2-year, we underperform previous cycles, right? The diminishing returns crowd will probably argue for this, right? That we significantly underperformed the 4-year cycle. Maybe the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, causes a lot of deflation and the market crashes. Maybe the tariffs cause all sorts of trauma. We have a recession, right? Who knows? I don't know. There are a lot of factors at play, and God forbid it's war that causes the markets to tank, right? There are many reasons it could cause markets to tank, including Bitcoin. And I hope if something's going to cause the markets to tank, it's something that doesn't have a human cost associated with it, like a war or a conflict. But there's another option too. There's a second option. We could exactly copy the 4-year cycle. The people, the stock to flow people, the plan Bs of the world, right? The people that say this cycle is exactly the same like previous cycles, and you can predict to the day exactly how it's going to happen. We're going to peak in October 2025 on this date, and you should buy back on this date in 2027, whatever. That's possible. We could repeat previous Bitcoin cycles. That's entirely possible. I think the diminishing returns crowd, option number one, they have a point. Bitcoin is a much larger asset than it used to be in previous cycles. I think they have a very valid point. I think the 4-year cycle people also have a very valid point in that, it's all Bitcoin's done so far, right? Like Bitcoin's had pretty consistent 4-year cycles. Maybe this time actually is not different. Maybe it's exactly what the 4-year cycle maxis are predicting that, hey, we're going to hit between 180, 250 grand this year, and then we're going to have a 60 to 75% decline and blah, blah, blah. Like maybe they're right. That could totally happen. There's also a third probability, a third option is that we outperform the 4-year cycle. And while they are the least popular crowd of all online, they also have a very valid point. These would be the people saying, we're going to have a $1 million Omega candle. These would be the people saying that Donald Trump's going to figure out Bitcoin. He's going to get over his little XRP Cardano phase. He's going to go all in Bitcoin. The US government's going to smash buy a bunch of Bitcoin. They're going to buy $50 billion of Bitcoin a month, no matter the price. They're going to become a buyer of last resort. And basically, all of a sudden, we're going to have $1 million Bitcoin in 2025, at latest 2026, right? A lot of people would rather subscribe to one of the first two options because in their mind, that has more certainty. The human brain craves certainty. It craves a story to tell itself. But the human brain loves the story to tell itself is that, oh my goodness, the future is going to happen and I can predict it, right? These first two options, that's what it is telling people subconsciously is that, guess what? You can predict Bitcoin price fluctuations to the upside and the downside in the future, and you can trade based on that, and you can get more Bitcoin as a function of that, right? That's why people prefer these two probabilities because it connotates more certainty and the brain craves certainty. Okay, this third probability that everything is out the window, all your models are destroyed, we're breaking to the upside, and the stock to FOMO chart is happening, that is the least popular probability because it is the one inherently that causes the brain to admit to itself that you can't have certainty, because that implicitly implies it doesn't matter what any of the charts say. It doesn't matter what anyone predicts. It doesn't matter what Luke Broyles says in his video. If and when Trump or the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or whomever, or China or North Korea or Russia or the Saudis or whomever goes all in Bitcoin and they start the nation state hash war, they start the mass adoption of Bitcoin at the nation state level where people are printing money to buy Bitcoin, you inherently can't predict that because you can't predict the actions of other human beings. The brain wants to believe it is in control. And believing that we're going to have an Omega candle inherently is an admission that it is outside of your control. Now, does that mean that I think option number three inherently makes it the most likely option? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying though is that people probably are underrating the probability for the cycle, right? Maybe this third option is only a 10% probability. Maybe it's very unlikely. 90% of the time, it's going to be option one or two, right? Maybe there's only a 10% chance that Donald Trump actually figures out Bitcoin and we have $1 million Bitcoin this year, next year, right? Maybe it's very unlikely, 10% chance. But my guess is that, let's say it actually is 10% chance. My guess is that the general sentiment from people is they would assign it only a 5% probability because the brain underrates it as a probability because it implicitly craves that kind of certainty. And so what I think is going to happen for this Bitcoin cycle and going into future Bitcoin cycles is that we're going to have a gradual change in probabilities, right? As we continue along this curve in the stock to flow model, right? As we continue to approach that end game for the US dollar, we have Bitcoin, hyper Bitcoinization, potentially dramatic inflation, if not hyperinflation for the US dollar, which again, I'm not expecting anytime soon. I think it's going to be a very long time. In fact, for many of us, it may not even be in our lifetimes, right? It probably will be in my lifetime, I personally believe. But the point is that you should not expect the US dollar to hyperinflate next year or the decade after that, right? Like the reality is that, yes, the dollar's weak, yes, the dollar's crap, but there are 140 other currencies that are exponentially more crap than the US dollar. And so, yes, obviously to you and me, Bitcoin is infinitely superior than the dollar, but to the rest of the world, first they have to figure out the dollar before then they can escape to Bitcoin, right? So my point is, I think this is going to happen. I think this upwards curve where we just go vertical, I do believe that is going to happen. I do believe you will not be able to buy any amount of Bitcoin, even for an infinite amount of dollars. I do believe that's going to happen. However, I think it's going to take a very long time, longer than what this black line is showing. And so, since that is my worldview, what I believe is that these three probabilities, which are the only three probabilities for every single Bitcoin cycle from now until the end of time, this is what I think is going to happen. We're going to go from a low probability, or excuse me, from a high probability of underperforming 4-year cycles to a perpetually lower probability we underperform 4-year cycles. I think we're going to go from a low probability of outperforming a 4-year cycle, right, on this kind of, vertical up move in nominal terms. And I think that probability is going to get higher and higher. I think we're going to go from whatever the percentage is now, right? These percentages are arbitrary, by the way. I'm just giving an example here, right? Again, you're craving certainty. You want to know exactly what's going to happen. I'm telling you exactly what could happen. These literally are the only three options for the rest of time for every Bitcoin cycle. Either we follow the cycle, this cycle, then we follow the cycle after that, then we follow the cycle after that. Or we underperform it, we continue to underperform it, and then these are the only three ways it can happen. And so I think over time, it's going to make less and less sense to trade. This cycle is going to be the easiest cycle to trade for every Bitcoin cycle going forward from here. Last cycle was easier to trade than this cycle because the probability of breaking upwards, I think, is higher, right? I still think it's a low probability, but last cycle, there was a 1 in 1,000 chance that the president of the United States were to stockpile 1 million Bitcoin. Now, there's maybe a 1 in 100 chance. I think it's still a 99% probability Trump doesn't stack 1 million Bitcoin because he's too distracted with the altcoins and everything else he's got going on right now. But you have to admit, it's 10 times more probable this time than last time. Whether you like Trump or not, whether you agree with my percentages or not, I'm just trying to give a conceptual idea here. And so the actual advice, the actual encouragement I would give to you all for you to pursue at your own risk is don't trade the Bitcoin. Don't trade it. Don't lose it. Don't sell it. If anything, buy more. Because in these scenarios, the only scenario where you're going to get burnt in terms of dollars is if this first scenario happens, if we underperform the 4-year cycle. And even if that happens, right? If we have a typical 4-year cycle, then guess what? Bitcoin's going higher this year. It's going to double, triple, maybe even quadruple this year. And you're going to be thrilled that you didn't panic sell when Bitcoin hit $78,000, right? So in that scenario too, which I think is probably the most likely that we copy the 4-year cycle perfectly, but not guaranteed, right? You're going to be pretty happy you held on. And likewise, if we actually outperform, which I don't think is likely, but I think it's the least likely of these three options. But if we actually outperform, if we get the vertical candle moves, if Donald Trump goes full triple maxi Michael Saylor mode and prints the dollar and bonds into oblivion to buy more Bitcoin, well, then obviously you're going to be glad you didn't sell it. And so the only way you're not going to be happy at holding on to your Bitcoin instead of panic selling it or anything else is if the cycle underperforms, right? That is the only scenario in which you're going to be unhappy. And in that scenario, you're looking at maximum 2 years before this price is base layer peak fear for Bitcoin, right? So unless Bitcoin breaks the power law, which I think, again, a lot of people watching may not like the power law because the power law doesn't include the debasement of the US dollar. But again, you have to think differently in nominal versus real terms. If you're thinking in real terms, I think the power law is a great model to look at. It's a great way to view the world, right? Everything in nature is a power law, right? The forest right outside here is a power law. The way traffic moves is a power law. Metabolism of different organisms is a power law. Nature follows a power law. And so, of course, it kind of makes sense in the same way that Facebook users or Amazon users or Apple users followed a power law from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. Kind of makes sense Bitcoin follows the same way. So my point is that then If your worst case is that first scenario where Bitcoin underperforms a 4-year cycle, even in that scenario, which is the only one against you, you're looking at maximum 2 years until Bitcoin would have to break the power law to the downside, which on this whole chart here, it's only done twice, once here in 2015, literally for weeks, one second time here in 2022 for about a month and a half, right? Like now seems like the best risk adjusted time to buy Bitcoin, like ever. Like you've never been able to buy Bitcoin with a higher probability of breaking the 4 year to the upside. Probably not going to happen this year. I don't think we're going to see $1 million Bitcoin this year, but we definitely could. And if we don't this year, we could next year. And if we don't next year, we could the year after that. And whatever you think, the probability is only going to get better and better. Bitcoin continues to survive. And the probability the dollar fails is only going to get worse and worse, farther away. So what is my personal allocation planning for this? Well, pretty high. I have a very, very, very small cash position. I mostly do that because I don't have a wife and a kid, mostly because I just want to have cash on hand for my bills for the month and the next couple of months, right? A lot of people, are similar to me, so take that bias with a massive Bitcoin-sized grain of salt. But I put my money where my mouth is. I am basically unchanged given this Bitcoin volatility. When Bitcoin was $16,000, people were telling me all kinds of nasty things. People were mad at me. People asked me why I didn't warn them about FTX, even though I did try to warn them about FTX. People asked me why I didn't see it coming, why things blah blah blah, or oh, you're being dangerous, encouraging people to get off zero and buy some Bitcoin at $16,000 because it's going to 12 grand. We all know for certain it's going to 12 grand, right? Sorry, buddy, it didn't. Now it's $85,000 and people are panicked, right? So my point is that would be the way I would encourage you to look at the Bitcoin cycle. Now, let's look at really short term. What's happening with Bitcoin and MicroStrategy? Well, MicroStrategy has bounced pretty hard. The quote unquote big dump in the last month or so here, from second half of February up to today in early March, been pretty brutal, right? Going down from 540 down to 300 or so was a pretty big fall, and that hurt a lot of people. Granted, of course, if you're honest with yourself, there was basically nobody that sold the $540 top, right? Even the people that timed the day exactly, like we were literally at the $540 level for like what, a couple hours. So realistically, even if you can read the charts, even if you're an astrology chart reader, probably you more realistically sold your MicroStrategy around the $440 level instead of 550. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. But this last little dump here, where MicroStrategy broke down below $300, is really upsetting people. It's really hurting people. But guess what? There's volatility both ways. We skyrocketed back up to about 300 this morning, and now we're already back down to the, whatever it is, 260s. The point is that there's a lot of pain in MicroStrategy right now. I can tell you anecdotally, there's a lot of pain in MicroStrategy right now. This is why, again, for those of you out there holding a very large position in MicroStrategy, this is why you probably don't want to hold MicroStrategy in a Bitcoin bear market. I do not think that is a good plan, because if Bitcoin falls and the premium MicroStrategy has against Bitcoin falls, that's going to really eat against you in a negative way. And it's important to keep in mind that as much as we love Bitcoin yield, that inherently has diminishing returns. In the same way we spoke earlier in this video about how it's easier for Bitcoin price to go from $1 to $100 than it is for it to go from $1,000 to $100,000, the same thing true inherently is true about Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy BTC yield. Obviously, having a 50% BTC yield on a 200,000 Bitcoin treasury is way easier than having a 50% Bitcoin yield on a $500,000, or excuse me, 500,000 Bitcoin treasury, right? Like this should be obvious. This should be inherent, but I don't think a lot of people have really put two and two together, right? The premium for MicroStrategy stock is what attracts people to MicroStrategy stock. It's what gives MicroStrategy more number go up ability than Bitcoin alone. That comes from Bitcoin yield of Saylor being able to buy more Bitcoins, but he can't buy more than 21 million Bitcoins. So inherently, at some point, he has to slow down his buying. Even if he's the only buyer left in the entire planet, at some point, the Bitcoin yield has to fall, and the market is forward looking. And so the premium the market is willing to give MicroStrategy shares inherently must fall in the future compared to now. Am I saying you should sell a MicroStrategy? No, I'm not. I own MicroStrategy stock, right? Like I love the stock. I love what Saylor's doing. I think it's great. But remember, everything trends to zero against Bitcoin. Gold, fine art, real estate, your stocks, especially your political currency. In fact, political currency not only trends towards zero, it falls to zero. Real estate will never hit zero in terms of Bitcoin, but it will trend towards zero forever. The dollar or the peso or whatever can fall to zero against Bitcoin. In MicroStrategy, I don't think it will fall to zero, and I don't even think it will fall towards zero, but it will trend towards one. It will trend towards a 1x premium because at some point, Michael Saylor's Bitcoin buys and Bitcoin yield will be such a small percentage, it won't warrant nearly the kind of premium that it has right now. And so again, you may think of being a fear monger. You may think that me saying this much is really early, but I'm clearing my conscience because I know exactly what's going to happen. It's exactly what's happened right now in the last week, except it'll be 100 times bigger in the next Bitcoin bear market. People are cursing me out. People are mad at me. People are giving me all kinds of hate in the comment section, emails, texts, in person, like, probably a lot more than maybe a lot of you watching understand. Which, by the way, I'm not saying that as a pity party. Like, I really don't care. Like, if I was here because of praise or critiques people gave me, like, I wouldn't have made it a single week, right? Like, the only reason I'm here is because I've got the passion and I'm clearing my conscience. Nobody can say I didn't warn you, right? So my point is, a lot of people are very mad at me right now because they held a lot of MicroStrategy and now they're really hurting, or they bought a lot of leverage, or they bought a lot of calls or whatever MicroStrategy, and it's like, yeah, you've been kind of burnt both ways with the upside and the downside volatility. It's really hurt if you've been over allocated to MicroStrategy. And so my encouragement for you MicroStrategy bulls out there is, remember, it's one thing to have a 3-month downturn in MicroStrategy price 50% when Bitcoin is down, whatever it is, 23, 25% or so. Like, that's painful enough. I don't know if you want to go through a full Bitcoin bear market, a full 18-month period where Bitcoin's only going down, plus then another 18 months where Bitcoin's grinding back up. Is there a chance we have the Omega cycle and Bitcoin outperforms the upside? Yes, absolutely. But let's say you think there's a 10% chance, put in your own percentages. I don't care. The principle is more important than the number. Like, there's a 90% chance your MicroStrategy is going to dramatically underperform Bitcoin to the downside at some point in the future, right? Like, probably you don't want to have an 80% exposure to MicroStrategy. Probably not even a 30% exposure. I'm nowhere near either of those, by the way. So, that's just something really, really keep in mind. But let's not only talk about MicroStrategy, let's also talk about the more important asset, Bitcoin. A lot of people are speculating. This chart is one day outdated, so forgive me for that, but I think it's useful. You can make a chart say whatever you want. And so this person made this chart look pretty bullish, right? Hey, we had a CME gap back in the low in late 2022, early 2023, right? We were looking at the power law chart earlier, where one of the only 2 times Bitcoin fell below the power law support band was in late 2022. That's what we're looking at on the left side of the chart here. You could say, oh, well, we had a CME gap when Bitcoin skyrocketed into, up from 15,000 all the way to $23,000. And then we filled it later perfectly. And that gave us a perfect setup, blah, blah, blah. And then we just kept going to the moon from there, right? You could say that. And you could overlay it with the current chart. And I don't know, it looks kind of close. It looks kind of similar, right? You have the two humps at the top, like a Campbell, as you do over here, right? And it could go back down to fill the new CME gap we created, by the way, and then go back up from there. But the point is that, you could give an argument that, hey, this is exactly what we've seen for the last couple of years, right? Bitcoin has done this chop consolidation movement, right? We stay flat, then we go up. Then we stay flat 3 to 6 months, then we go up. Then we have one last washout at the end, then we go up again, right? Same thing happened in 2024. And you can make the argument today that, hey, we're 3 months through this 4 to 5 month period of Bitcoin consolidating in the $90,000 to $110,000 range, with this last flush out to the high 70s and low $80,000 range, and we're just going to keep going up from here. You could make that argument. I think probably the odds are pretty good in your favor for the argument. However, make no mistake, if Trump and Elon keep cutting government spending, which is the largest human, like, just think in first principles, the largest human institution in the planet is the US government and the spending the US government has. And just like if you started cutting the spending of the largest company in the world, that's probably going to have second order ramifications. Probably it's going to be the same thing with the government. You start cutting 1%, 2%, 5% of the government spending, probably it's going to have ramifications. Some good, some bad. And both good and bad can have good or bad implications of price, right? You can have something good happen in the world, but that might lead downwards Bitcoin price movement, right? Or vice versa. Point is, there are so many moving parts here that I don't know, and you surely should not know. What you should do if you are craving that certainty is focus on what actually is in your control. What is actually in your control is buying as much Bitcoin as possible and holding that Bitcoin for as long as possible, waiting for the upside moves in nominal terms and more importantly, in real terms, right? In nominal terms, Bitcoin is going up as dollars trend towards zero and eventually hit zero in terms of Bitcoin. In real terms, non-nominal, but real terms, Bitcoin is still trending up, albeit at a slower rate. And ultimately, the other thing you can control is making friends in Bitcoin. A lot of you really respect a lot of these speakers here on the screen, as well as myself. Parker Lewis, James Lavish, Stefan Levert, Marty Bent, Bitstein, Dante Cook, Bob Burnett, Lynn Burstow, Guy Swan, myself, and Gary Leland. These are the speakers coming up here 1 month from today in Dallas, Texas at BitBlock Boom. Maybe you can't control Bitcoin price. Maybe you can't control what it's going to do in the short term or the long term. But what you can control is taking advantage of this opportunity. Bitcoin price is down. People are in a panic. People are not going to Bitcoin conferences like they will be doing in the future. This is your opportunity to make friends, meet new people, meet speakers, be able to pick their brain of what they think is going to happen this upcoming Bitcoin bull cycle, and ultimately make memories. Because guess what? You can always make more Bitcoin, but you won't be able to make memories forever. You're alive, you're healthy, maybe you have the freedom to do it. Myself, I'm going to as many Bitcoin conferences as I can because I don't have a wife or a kid, and I don't, I have the ability, and hopefully someday I do have a wife and a kid, and I won't be going to these conferences anymore, right? And many of the people on the screen here I was just showing, I think many of them won't be going to Bitcoin conferences in the future anymore because people get older, people have families that begin or families that grow, people have business opportunities that call them in other directions, and just frankly, there are going to be more and more competition, and Bitcoin speakers are going to be more and more spread out over a larger competition of events. So my point is, if you want to actually do something in your control and actually go and meet people in person, highly encourage you to go to BitBlock Boom. I'm giving away a ticket. I have a ticket that's a $569 value. So it's worth about 600 bucks. You'll be able to meet me. You'll be able to meet all the speakers you see here on the screen. And most importantly, you'll be able to make friends. You'll be able to pick people's brains. This is totally worth well over $1,000 in my opinion because of the quality of insight and the quality of friendships you're getting. I'm giving it away to someone watching this video. All I ask is that you donate about half of that, which is about $280 to charity. So give me a text on the screen. It's first come, first serve. The first person to reach out to me and say, hey, Luke, I want to go to BitBlock Boom in Dallas, Texas. I should have given you the dates. April 3rd to 6th is when events will be happening in Dallas. The conference itself will be the 4th and 5th. So either you could choose the 4th or the 5th, or you could come the full 4 days, whatever the case. If you want to go to Dallas, Texas, meet all the speakers you're seeing on the screen, actually take something in your life that's going to be a positive movement instead of doom scrolling all night, every night about worrying about what Bitcoin price is going to do. Highly encourage you to reach out. Give me a text. I don't need to make any money off of this. I just, would appreciate if you would be willing to donate some money to a charity. Happy to give you a ticket. Would love to meet you. Would love to hang out. Ultimately, I want you to have some skin in the game, but I don't need to benefit from it. So if you want to go to BitBlock Boom in Dallas, Texas, 1 month from today and actually take something in your life that's beneficial to your life instead of worrying about what Bitcoin price is going to do, give me a text. First come, first serve. I'm only doing this with one ticket, but happy to have you go. And ultimately, more than anything, the encouragement is stay focused, stack sats, and understand tangible and intangible risk. A lot of people right now, unfortunately, I think are making very large mistakes. Um, you know, Again, one of the anecdotes I started in this video with this as well. One of the anecdotes I'm seeing is people get very mad at me for basically no reason. Like, I give somebody some Bitcoin for free, and they yell at me, or I, answer a question they have and they, curse me out or something. I had somebody else do that to me this morning. So, anyway, so that's one anecdote. The other anecdote I'm seeing is that people are making really, really bad mistakes, in my opinion. I'm seeing a lot of people sell Bitcoin in a panic. I'm seeing a lot of people, buy altcoins in a panic, thinking that, oh, this is the bottom for the altcoins. I'm not so sure, right? I don't want to digress too much and talk about the altcoins, but I guess I will because a lot of people are kind of doing that, right? A lot of people have the logic right now that, oh, I'll sell my Bitcoin and go into altcoins because this is surely the bottom and the altcoins are going to bounce from here. Like, You can think that if you want, but again, look at the probabilities. If we underperform this cycle, you do not want to be holding altcoins. If we copy the 4-year cycle, then altcoins will probably do fine. If we outperform the 4-year cycle, your altcoins are not going to do fine because that is a hyper Bitcoinization moment, not a hyper Solanaization moment, right? And so my point is that, yeah, sure, maybe the altcoins do well this cycle, but I inherently believe it's a lower probability than what they did last cycle. And whatever the odds, your little altcoin degen trade works out this cycle, it's going to be a lower probability next cycle. And it's going to be a lower probability after that, right? So, I'm seeing a lot of people make mistakes right now. They're panic selling all their MicroStrategy, panic selling all their Bitcoin, going way too heavy into altcoins. I don't have a single dollar worth in altcoins for full transparency. I'm seeing a lot of that. People make the biggest mistakes when they're really emotional. So my encouragement to you is that if you believe that you need to prepare for the Bitcoin bull market top, reach out to me. Let's create a Bitcoin cycle top plan for you, because the last thing you want to be doing is creating a plan the moment the volatility hits. And that's exactly what I saw personally, anecdotally. When Bitcoin was starting to fall out of the $90,000 range, nobody reaching out. And then all of a sudden, in peak volatility, that's when everybody reaches out. That's when everybody panics. That's when all the bad mistakes are made. So my encouragement is that whether you're in Bitcoin or MicroStrategy or probably a combination of both, have a plan and plan for the volatility, both to the upside and the downside, because that is when people make mistakes. Your brain craves certainty. And in that volatility, it feels more certain than ever that it's going to continue. A few days ago, when Bitcoin was falling down and down and down from 95 to 85 to $78,000, everybody felt certain that at least for the next few days, it's going to continue to fall. And guess what? They were wrong. We had a Bitcoin Omega candle or whatever it is going up $10,000 in a single day. Everybody was wrong. And then yesterday, when it went up and Trump's posting on Truth Social and blah, 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 everybody was sure we're going back to $100,000, in a couple days. And now here we are again, literally the next day, back down to the $85,000 range. In that peak volatility, that's when your brain craves peak certainty, and your brain will therefore justify illogical things in order to crave ultimately what it desires, which is that certainty. The money you own is as close to certainty as you can acquire. Bitcoin is the cash. Bitcoin is the money. Bitcoin is the digital asset that is the most certain in the digital landscape. Use that as your form of craving Bitcoin digital certainty. I would encourage you, do that. Don't focus on short-term price fluctuations. And as a final little promotion there, raising a couple $100 for charity. If you want to go to Bitcoin Dallas, would love for you to go. Love for you to have some skin in the game. So would love, just don't give it to me, give it to a charity. Just text me. We'll sort it out. First person to reach out. Happy to have you come along, and I'll organize as many side events as I can for you so that you get value even beyond the conference itself. So thank you everyone for your time. Remember to have a long-term time horizon. Bitcoin continues up and to the right. Eventually, it's not even going to go up to the right. It's just going to go just up as Bitcoin goes vertical. But keep in mind, any fiat price for Bitcoin is a smash buy, because someday, even an infinite amount of US dollars, even an infinite amount of political currency units will not even be able to buy you a single Satoshi. Thanks for your time.